us. I'm pleased and honored to introduce Dean Whiteman, who will give the opening remarks.
Thanks, Jennifer. Thank you all for coming. We have a great turnout tonight. It's really great to see as many participants as we have online. This Prime Forging a Career in Branding panel was an idea that Professor Coupland and our alum, Timmy Gard, came up with more than 8 years ago while they were having coffee in the business building when Timmy was in town for a Smeal Alumni Society board meeting. This is the 8th year of the branding panel. It has featured 48 panelists, mostly Smeal alumni. Tonight is an all Smeal alumni panel, really great. We've had panelists representing 38 different companies, and tonight's total attendance will mean that we will reach 2,000 students, alumni, faculty, and guests after tonight's event. And I've been here most years, in person originally and virtually more recently. This panel is really well aligned with Prime's mission to provide students with opportunities in brand management, advertising, and consumer insights. And the students who created this and built Prime are now at great companies like Assembly Global Advertising, Apple, American Eagle, L'Oreal, and others. And over the years, Prime alumni have launched their careers at major advertising agencies and big brands like J&J, Pfizer, Nestle, United Airlines, Nike, Kenvue, Reckitt Benckiser, Google, Amazon, Twitter, and many more. And I'm really pleased that we have a lot of former Prime panelists and alumni in the audience tonight. Many students and many people have worked very hard to put together today's panel, including Prime's president, Mara Lisa Capello. So I'll let Lisa take it from here and introduce my great friend, Timmy Gard.
Thank you so much, Dean Whiteman. As Prime's president this year, I am really honored and excited to present this year's Penn State Prime panel. Before I get started, I will be sending a Google Doc in the chat right now, and that'll have all the panelists' kind of introductions as well as the breakout links that we will be using after this main Q&A session. But thank you so much for coming again. And without further ado, I'm going to pass it off to Timmy Gardy, who's going to lead tonight's session.
Hi, everybody. Being in the marketing world, I figured I'd come out with a moniker or a tagline. So here we go. 8's going to be great. That's how we're going to kick this off. So before we start, I just want to thank Lisa and her entire Prime team, Alice, Emily, Anna, Lily, Stella, William. I mean, they've been amazing working with us nights, mornings, weekends on getting stuff through. So I really appreciate that. And Jen, to you, Dr. Copeland and Meg and Dean Whiteman, thanks for showing up tonight. Here's what we're going to do, right? So we have an hour. We're going to go through an interactive session with the panelists, and we have the breakout rooms. I'm going to ask a bunch of questions. The panelists are going to talk amongst themselves, hopefully, and we're going to get going. Hopefully, it's going to be a really good experience. But to kick this off, right, let me introduce the panelists real quick. So we have 6 folks here. We have Carolyn Fitzgerald, who's the CEO of a company called Women's Sports Goals. Lindsay Gatto, she is a singer brand manager for Mars Wrigley, the Snickers line. Peter Kissinger, who just jumped over to Kenvue. If you folks read, J&J just spun off their business unit, Kenvue, and Peter has joined that group. Rachel Saslaw is with Associate Director of Product Marketing for Super Awesome, which is an Epix Games company. Ryan Warrender is from Google Chat. Everybody knows who Google is. And Wendy Dill, with great experience. She's now Executive Director, Head of Advisor and Field Marketing for JP Morgan. So we have 6 unique, different personalities, all with great experiences. So let's go. So 2022, right? The key trend, the key word was pivot. How are we going to pivot? How are we going to pivot in marketing? How are we going to pivot working in a hybrid environment? How are we going to pivot in getting to our customers? Well, this year, our keywords were, right, as of November, generative pre-learned transformer. Who in the heck would have thought those 3 words would have existed a year ago? GPT, ChatGPT, launched in November 2022. When it first came out, there was a lot of panic. This is going to eliminate jobs. What's going to happen? It's kind of vague. How are folks going to use it? Well, now it's kind of like making its revolutionary impact in so many different ways. Everybody's using it. If you read what Coca-Cola announced last week, they're going to be using it for their branding. So everybody's on top of AI. Here we go. Carolyn, it's for you. How are you, right? You knew it, right? How's your brand strategy? How are your brand plans going to be altered? What are you doing now? What are you going to do in the next 2 years? How are you retraining your folks to be more technologically advanced? And how are you going to keep up with this in terms of what you want to do to build out your brand and optimize your brand experience?
Such a good question. You certainly don't open up with softballs here. We're just going for it. But no, that's a great question. So the space that I work in, as Timmy said earlier, is women's sports. And, you know, women's sports, the whole reason I started my business is because we have a severe lack of resources in the women's sports industry. Women's sports get only 1% of sponsorship dollars, 4% of media coverage. The pay gaps are really large. So I know I'm personally really excited about the entrance of AI because it's another way that we can work smarter with the limited resources that we have in women's sports in general. For my brand specifically, for my organization, it's just kind of that on a micro level. We're just going to use these tools that are available to us to do more. So one thing specifically that we've already adapted is we create a lot of content at Goals, social media content, digital content, and using these tools are a way that we can work smarter and we can get, you know, a couple steps ahead and not have to create everything from scratch. So we are just reworking some of our workflows to use those tools to be able to do more and work a bit more effectively.
I think to Carolyn's point, like, I think that AI and new emerging technology enables us to scale, but also I think a lot about like, there's so much technology in the world and so much to make us more efficient that I think a lot about like what needs to stay human, like what in our companies needs to maintain a level of humanness. And I think that that is like a really interesting way to think about where you should be putting your energy towards some of these new emerging technologies and AI, because I think there's a lot that AI can do, but like there's a reason why a lot of people are still healthily employed within the tech and branding worlds. And I think a lot about, yeah, just like a reframing about what needs to stay human in the rise of all this emerging tech.
What's that old saying, like, $1 for the hammer, 99 for knowing where to hit? So I feel like it's again just another tool that we have in our toolbox. Like we keep it human for that 99. Like we have to know how to use these tools. So I like everything that you just said, Rachel. I think that is absolutely right. What's human and what is this tool? How do we use it?
Anyone else on the panel want to jump in?
I feel like it's my due diligence to jump in.
Yeah.
So I work at Google. I work with AI pretty consistently. And I will say, you know, I think it comes across like most technologies. It's very scary at first. I do think this is an area where we should, you know, proceed with caution and be super, super thoughtful. But I do think that it will be transformative to like how we work. And I think AI should be viewed as a complement to get more done. So it can do everything from like, you know, automating repetitive tasks so you can focus more on doing your job than, you know, scheduling meetings. It can help you provide, you know, insights and recommendations much faster. So you're making decisions that you feel more confident about, ultimately like saving, you know, you're putting what's best for your customers or your company. And then lastly, I just think it helps everyone become more collaborative. It just helps, it really levels the playing field. And I think the more that people kind of experiment with the different use cases, the more successful you can be at solving some of the biggest problems that your company has.
Oh, good. All right, we can move on. Wendy, this is for you. When we spoke, we had a really good conversation and you threw some things out there that really made me think. You talked about how storytelling plays an important role in marketing, just as hospitality does. But you went a step further and said it's not about storytelling, it's about story asking. So I would like you to explain to me and the rest of the folks here the difference between storytelling, story asking, and how that plays an important part in marketing today.
Oh, Timmy, that is a great thing to bring up, and thanks for remembering that. Yeah, right. Everybody's talking about storytelling, and we're going to be storytellers, and we're going to push out a lot of stories to the consumers because we know what they want to hear. But that gets really boring after a while, doesn't it? I mean, the whole point of digital interfaces is engagement. And, I look across my industry, for example, and I wonder, are we really using the power of digital, of websites to really ask people their stories and get them to engage with the brand in a way that is meaningful to them and different than something that our competitors are doing. So it is one of my pet projects to, really start shifting the conversation from storytelling to story asking, which in my business, that's what we're all about. We work with ultra high net worth clients, and when we sit down and talk with them, it's all about them. And so that concept is really coming true in the personal interactions. But how can we as marketers really be a little less selfish and put the focus on the consumer and drawing out their story so that we can better serve them?
Great. Thank you.
Wendy, I absolutely love that. And I've never heard it phrased that way. So I can't wait to tell my team about that tomorrow.
Yeah, right.
I would say one lens that it made me think of is our social efforts. So we pretty much don't talk about the word audience anymore. We pretty much strictly talk about communities and building a community, or what community do we want to reach. And I would say our Skittles brand team is probably the best within our business at it. They were ranked the #1 brand on Twitter. And it's because they're hyper focused on the community aspect and having that back and forth dialogue to really build a stronger connection. So I love that.
So Lindsay, that kind of leads me to the next question, which is both for you and for Peter. And that is, I'm gonna let Peter go first since you just spoke, and we'll come back to you. And that question is, what makes a brand admirable? And Peter, this should be right up your alley right now, moving from the big corporate company into another one right now. What makes a brand admirable?
So it makes you feel something, right? It makes you feel like you can be a part of something. So I think about the brands that I manage, like Neutrogena, right? Empowerment. Like when you use our facial cleanser, rapid wrinkle repair cream, acne prone skin, it's that empowerment that we're just trying to make you feel as a consumer. And it's, what Wendy said as well, it's like, we're not trying to push on a story to you, or we're not trying to push on a company narrative to you. And frankly, consumers don't care. Like as N is one, right? Like I don't care all the internal meetings you would sit in to kind of push something onto me. What makes a brand is the experience, but how it makes you feel. It makes you want to be a part of that brand. Like launching our first TikTok campaign 2 years ago when I was on the Amazon business, having all of these like at-home moms really speak to the empowerment that they feel with our baby care brands and that assurance it makes them feel. Everything from that to, Listerine, right? And being #1 doctor recommended. But what makes a brand, I think, is how it makes you feel and the story that you want to tell as well. And I know like the Skittles example is a great one. Like that's a super impactful, powering statistic that she thrown out because it's something that you want to get a part of and kind of get a piece of it for yourself.
I love that. I'll build on that just by saying that it's a little bit of walking the walk. So a lot of times we use the phrase acts over ads. So M&M's was our first purpose-driven brand, and we did it specifically starting on M&M's. And then of course we want that to trickle to all of our brands, but we wanted to be really intentional about how we were making an impact and how purpose was coming to life in a meaningful way, where we were doing meaningful acts and not just putting out ads.
Timmy, did you said admirable, right?
Yes.
What makes a brand admirable?
Go for it.
Building on top of that, I think it comes back, for me at least, to values alignment, and that's economic value alignment and social value alignment. So like a brand is, you feel something, you feel connected to your brand when you can afford it, and it's, it's you value what you're paying for, whatever that brand is bringing to the table. But I think more than that, it's a values alignment. Or is that brand, are they conducting business in a way that you think is ethical? are there causes associated with what they're doing that align with what you believe? So I think that values alignment, I think that's where that admiration piece comes in.
Great.
Also, like a lot of the brands that we invest in or spend time with reflect our identity. So it's not just about like making sure that the brand that you're investing in, buying in, wearing, whatever it is, like has internal practices that you care about, but also it's like, how are you perceived by walking around with a Starbucks cup, or how are you perceived when you're wearing a Nike shirt? And I think that especially like I've done a lot of research around Gen Z and like the younger generation really valuing the relationship that brands have with like your outward identity, and what does that brand mean about my how I'm being portrayed by my peers.
Well, Rachel, you kind of set me up. You guys are doing great. It's almost like you looked at my questions, because the next question is for you and Ryan. And that is, we know that analytics are really critical in today's environment. Everything we have to do has to be measured. What are both of you doing with what do you think you should be doing in terms of analytics? What's the frequency? What type of strategies are you putting in place? And then what action are you doing behind those analytics? Go ahead. Rachel, I'll let you continue, then we'll jump over to Ryan.
Is a massive question. What are
Right.
we? Yeah. Well, it's really interesting because I think in like current headlines, many of you may have seen that there's this movement to kind of abolish the third-party cookie. And I think like tracking behavioral notions of an audience is going to be more and more obsolete. A lot of brands are focusing more on the content alignment and contextual alignment of our products and our advertisements. So a lot of the times it's about the content that you're advertising against versus the individual IP address that is experiencing that. So a lot of third-party retargeting, for example, you're on Nike.com and then you go on Facebook and you see a banner ad for a Nike sweatshirt. That's going to become more and more obsolete. And I think brands are trying to do a lot more with some of these cues around the content and environments that their audience is spending time in. So for example, I actually work a lot on the youth space, which has a lot of barriers around analytics and data, which is actually really interesting. Like, how do we navigate in that space within the gaming youth space? And one thing that we do is when we deliver ads, it is all about contextual taxonomy and contextual categorization. So if let's say Lunchables is trying to reach a youth audience, 3 to 9-year-olds across a digital landscape, instead of finding out the IP addresses of 3 to 9-year-olds, which is illegal and infringing of the COPPA Act, we instead are looking at different content, whether that be apps or YouTube channels or whatnot that align with that audience, and then deliver those ads on that content. So I think that like analytics and the way that people and brands are leveraging data, especially to kind of like complete the e-commerce life cycle of, I saw a brand, I engaged with a brand, and like, how do you deal with like the follow through of that purchase, I think is going to become like really interesting and different as kind of behavioral targeting gets phased out of it.
Great. Ryan.
Yeah, it was awesome, Rachel. I completely agree. Yeah, I guess what I would say, I think analytics are helpful for building empathy. Like, you really can use data to help put yourself in customer shoes. So we always ask ourselves before we build something, like, what does success look like? We call it like setting a North Star metric. So a lot of times when you're building tech products, it could be like engagement. Are people using this? Are they finding it useful? Is it helpful? Are we solving a real world problem? And then we'll go through that journey and we'll replicate how users are using the product, and we'll try to find where the pain points are. Like, what are those micro moments that are annoying? And then we'll try to fix those. And then we prioritize those. And then those are kind of like how we figure out what to do next. So I think it really just all stems from like, understanding where users need help and then making sure that you're prioritizing it. And I think the thing that's commonly missed is that you need to set a goal of like what good looks like, so that as you're kind of tracking data, you don't need all of these things. You need one North Star metric to make sure that, yeah, we're moving the needle, we're making the right changes, and we're progressing towards the end goal of making a better product or better brand.
Great. Wendy, you've worked for many large companies over your time. What are some of the challenges you faced during the branding process? Maybe you could talk a little bit about the branding process in these companies and how you needed to pivot during the past few years and what you've learned.
That's a big question, Tim. It's a big question. I think first I could talk about when I worked at Ernst & Young many times ago. I was actually the first global brand manager for Ernst & Young. And so you're asking me, what is the process, right? And it dovetails in with analytics as well. So at that time, Ernst & Young went to market as a separate country firms. Every firm did its own thing. Germany liked their maroon paisley brand visual identity, and our Brazilian firm had a lovely tropical color palette, and on and on and on. And beyond the visual identity, there was really the brand messaging. And what was the brand promise of Ernst & Young around the world? And so in terms of process, it's not a little one, right? It's a very slow, lengthy process, which involves a lot of research, a lot of diplomacy, a lot of travel, a lot of meetings to really boil down, what is this brand? I mean, everybody on this call might be a marketer, but we're also consumers. And it's often very hard to describe the essence of a brand. I say Nike, you think what? I say United Airlines, you think what? Right? Everybody has like 1, 2, 3 things they just quickly think about a brand. And so the process of coming up with what was that at Ernst & Young was really my job for, I guess it was the first 5 years after business school. And really the secret sauce there, it's not just the research, it's not just the color palette, it's not the design of the logo. It's really bringing everybody together behind that brand and, spending the time with the leaders from the other country firms to, explain why we all needed to go to market as one global brand, because we were serving global clients. We couldn't be serving a global client and sending them 8 million different looking documents. So that was a phenomenal experience. I traveled to London, Switzerland, Amsterdam, all over this country, and really boiled it down to, at that time, what Ernst & Young was known for was, from thought to finish. We weren't going to just come in and give you all these big consultant ideas, right? We were going to give you the ideas and then we were going to execute it. And then Dean Whiteman, I'm sure you'll remember the Sarbanes-Oxley era, and Timmy, right? So then the brand had to change and it became quality in everything we do, right? Because the brand promise had to change. And so the brand had to change with it. So I don't know, hopefully that anecdote helps, bring a story into, answering that question in a way that, was really a real-time experience for a firm.
Before I ask the next question, Carolyn, you've been smiling and shaking your head. You want to jump in and answer that, or you want to react to what Wendy said?
Wendy, as you're talking, there's this quote that just kept popping into my mind. I'm smiling because it's a Dolly Parton quote. It's find out who you are and do it on purpose. So it's defining I feel like that applies really well to branding. You want to figure out what your values are. You want to figure out what your brand is. And then you want to do that on purpose over and over and over again and really live by that brand and those values that you define. So that's why I was smiling, because I'm thinking of Dolly Parton and that quote in my head.
Yeah. So that kind of leads me to the next. You guys are like, it's really telepathy. Peter, this is for you. It kind of plays into that. How important is it creating personas for your brand, and what's your methodology behind that? And what do you do to make sure that it's accurate on a continuing basis?
Creating personas, that was your question?
Yes.
Yeah, so even from when I first started at J&J 5 years ago, we lived in Boston, to Minneapolis, to Philly, working across a lot of brands, a lot of retailers like Target, CVS. The common theme across all of those has been we always start with listening to the consumer, doing a lot of qualitative, quantitative studies on morphing a bunch of feedback into like who is the person or the people that are buying this product. That becomes sort of your persona, but I almost don't like using the term persona because for me, then you're putting your brand and you're putting the people who consume your brand into a box. And that is by no means like what we're in the business of. When I think about just 8 months ago, when our consumer division of J&J completely separated from pharma and med device, we're now Kenvue. We're the largest global pure play brand and companies in the world. We have a lot of brands that, yes, we formulate during the new product innovation process, the target market, the target consumer, which has a little bit element of that persona to it. Say it's demographic or geographic, right? But I don't think leading with a persona is what's going to get you, at least in the e-com space, going to get you to the successful point you want to go. And Ryan mentioned the North Star. Like for me, after recently taking over our Uber Eats, DoorDash, Instacart, part of our global Amazon businesses, it's understanding those markets that Wendy talked about. How are they different? How are they serving different people to fulfill and meet their needs? So we lead with persona through qualitative, quantitative studies to get an idea of who we're trying to reach, who we even want to reach, and who's going to reach back out to us, more importantly. But that's where I say we start with in today's age, at least where I stand in the e-com space.
Lindsay, you were shaking your head. You want to jump on top of that?
Absolutely agree. We loosely use persona, but it comes back to the word community. We talk HVC or high value community. And what we do, same based on a lot of qualitative and quantitative data. And what we do with them is create what we call consumer journeys. So how do we think through the entire funnel of, someone is not even thinking about your brand. How do you get their attention? Then are they planning to shop, or are they being impulsive, and how are they consuming? And then I'm thinking, of course, about candy. So people are consuming, but then also how are they engaging with the brand? So those nuances through the consumer journey change based on your persona or high value community.
I love that. Lindsay, we call it CDTs over here, customer decision trees. E-com CDT is totally different than when you walk into a store at Target. On the same wavelength there with you.
So kind of in line with that, Rachel, how do you use research to measure brand satisfaction or awareness or attitude? And, what do you measure and what tools do you have? And what kind of information can you provide to the students who are learning about research in their classes, qualitative, quantitative, online, IDIs, et cetera? What are you doing?
Can you just repeat the beginning of that question? How do I use research?
How are you using research to measure awareness, attitude, usage of your product or your service or your company?
Oh, I all the time. I mean, if you're not noticing and understanding patterns and trends of your consumers, then you're very out of touch, I think, from your business. We have an in-house insights team that manages both our qual and quant research. And we do a lot of research for our own needs to better understand our customer, but we also do a lot of research. I, being a part of Epic Games, am in a B2B function where a lot of our research is actually shared out to our customers as white papers, reports, analytical insights for our business customers to kind of better understand. It's kind of like our version of a TV commercial in a way, in which we are showing off our expertise and showcasing how we are leveraging our internal insights team to drive success for their business. When it comes to like inbound research and how we are collecting all of that, so we do a lot of panel studies. Back in my Unilever days, we were like buried in Nielsen, which was like my one love. It was amazing because you were able to chop and screw all of the different data from every single retailer down to every single SKU about what's performing and what's not. And I remember being an analyst on the Walgreens team at Unilever, and you know, you see that the business is down, and then you double click into that and you say, okay, well, it's down at Walmart. And then you double click into that, and then you say, okay, well, it's down in our premium line. You double click into that and you're like, oh, okay, it's down in our premium, you know, 46 ounce versus 12 ounce. Okay, let's look at the competitive set within large format shampoos. Oh, we're noticing that our competitor is, you know, driving a really crazy 99-cent sale on their product right now. So it's really interesting to be able to go into that level of depth, to be able to understand consumer patterns, to then inform how you're going to react as a business. And there are a lot of different levers to react to, including like shopper marketing, long-term brand innovation, things like that. It's a little different in the B2B landscape, but that's just one example from my consumer days.
Anybody else want to answer on the research question?
Yeah, I do. You know, it's interesting. Many of you on this panel are in consumer products, right? Something that all of us buy. And in my businesses, most of them and the, you know, where I am now, you know, what we're selling is a very sticky, high ticket item sale, right? And that has its own marketing and branding challenges. You know, it's not, you know, it's not a consumer good, right? It's like, that's not my wheelhouse, consumer products, right? So I'm always fascinated by how the marketing differs. You know, in my business, when we win a client who has $10 million, they're staying for a while, right? Because it's a sticky transaction. It's a lot of paperwork and legal forms and record keeping. And so for us, the marketing and the brand really are so critical to, you know, building that upper funnel and then lower funnel and through consideration to decision. But then even once we're in that relationship with them, we have to continue reminding why, you know, what they love about the brand, what do we stand for, and how do we make good on our brand promise. And so I would just say to all the students on the phone, you know, as you contemplate your future plans and you think about the types of fields that you might go into in terms of what you're going to market someday, you know, you have to think about the speed of the sales cycle in all these different industries that this panel represents.
Thank you.
I, I, yes,
Yep, go. Right.
go ahead.
Carolyn,
Rock, paper, scissors.
Carolyn and Ryan.
I'll just talk quickly. So we use research and data with our company at Goals. We really use it to challenge outdated ways of thinking around women's sports and to really challenge the status quo. So for a long time, there's been this perception about women's sports, like they're just kind of like a charity. They're not a profitable business. No one really cares about women's sports. No one watches the WNBA. All the money is in the NBA and in men's sports. But we have data now. There used to be this missing data problem as well as women's sports, but we have data now around the caliber of women's sports fans. And we know now that women's sports fans are this really highly engaged customer. They are actually more loyal to brands that sponsor women's sports teams and leagues than that on the men's side. So there's all this consumer power within women's sports fans. And until we had this data and research, we couldn't go to people who had this like doubt or these outdated ways of thinking about women's sports. We couldn't prove to them that there was business value around investing in women's sports, but now we have the research, so we can just challenge that. And it's like, oh, you think no one watches women's sports? Well, actually, 93,000 people just showed up to a women's volleyball game in Nebraska 2 weeks ago. People care about women's sports and they watch it. So having the data and the numbers can really challenge the status quo and, again, debunk some of those myths that are out there. Ryan,
Yeah,
sorry to cut you
yeah.
off.
No. I think your point on gaps in data is so spot on. Like, I think it's really important that you have to adjust your research approach based on the phase of your brand. Newer brands should be approaching problems different than more mature brands. So one way of thinking that I was exposed to earlier in my career, and Google uses this method as well, is called design thinking. There's a really good book that I plug. It's The Design of Everyday Things, but it basically gets into like, how do you start identifying the gaps in different phases? You should empathize, define, iterate, prototype, and then test. And then you kind of just keep going through that same cycle, and it really helps you identify like where the biggest problems at. So like during the discovery phase, you might want to, do user interviews where you sit down with 2 or 3 people that represent, like the audience you're trying to go after, or the community, I think is a better term. I like that. You could use surveys if you want to cast it more broad. It's very early, right? But then as you start to hone in on the problem that you want to solve, there's like ways you can do it. So coming from a tech background, you can do usability testing, you can do A/B testing. There's a lot of different ways that you can kind of find answers to your problem. But the TLDR is like, I highly recommend checking out the book, the Design of Everyday Things. It's just like a very simple way of teaching you how to think and solve problems and how to find gaps in data. That, I think Caroline hit the nail on the head. It was like always a problem when you're trying to grow your brand.
Good, thank you. We did get some questions for some students when they registered. I've been asking a few, but this is definitely a question from one of the students. I'm going to ask Lindsay. How important is it for the sales and marketing teams to work together and make sure they're on the same page regarding messaging, positioning, strategy, objectives, target audiences, and programs?
It's a great question and a loaded question. I'll give you kind of two answers from different lenses. The first is we call our sales and marketing one demand. So we need to work as one demand in order to do anything. So when you think about the CPG industry, yes, we're always hyper-focused and we want to target what the consumer wants and needs and how the consumer is going to react and engage with your brand. But the customer piece, so think a Walmart, a Target, they're critical in helping us get our product in front of our consumer. So without that intermediary piece of the customer, or you could think about it as a retailer, but technically to us, they're our customer, we don't have that visibility and the top awareness with our consumers or those shoppers. So working in partnership with our sales team is incredibly important. The other piece, and actually I think I'm frozen.
We can still hear you though.
Okay, perfect. It's telling me my internet connection is unstable, which is perfect timing. I would say the second piece of sales and marketing and how those work together is that when you are a marketer, you really are a general manager over your brand and your projects. And sales is such a critical piece to success as a marketer or really a general manager. So understanding the sales pieces and what levers you can pull to really drive those sales is critical to you being successful in that role. And just one other thing to note that I wish I knew when I was graduating from SMEAL 5 years ago is that sales experience really does help you become a better and more well-rounded marketer. So when I was told, sales is really the way into marketing, I was confused and I didn't know if the right path or if that's something that they were just.
Oh, we lost her. I think we lost you. Can everybody hear me? Okay.
We could
Can you
read
hear
her
me?
lips though, and she said she was so grateful for something.
Yeah. Does anybody else want to answer that question before we move on?
Well, it's interesting because I think since I've had experience on both B2C and B2B, there's a really interesting dynamic between marketing and sales and a B2C function and then B2B. I think there's a lot of CPG companies. I know at Unilever, I did a rotational program, and I think at Frito-Lay as well. Like, they require you to have on the ground experience as a seller before you are in a marketing function. And that's because you get a real taste of like putting yourself in the customer's shoes, being able to identify what that experience is like from a consumer view, but also from a retailer perspective. And from a B2B perspective, like, it's really interesting because sellers are the catalyst to my business making money. So it's not like a consumer good where you go to the shelf and you're buying Doritos off the shelf. My sales team is actually having to transact with teams. So I guess probably similar to Wendy's experience with these like high ticket customers, my sales team, I'm providing them with a pitch deck and materials and collateral and a brand story, as well as the ability to be able to have a discussion, kind of bring in a customer, identify their pain point, how we solve for that, and be able to close a deal. And so there's a lot of synergy in between the marketing team and the sales team in being able to close the deal and keep bring in and retain those B2B clients as well.
Yeah,
Good.
I'd like to add on to that. I think there's a catchy little phrase that it might help the students to kind of think about the relationship between marketing and sales. Marketing is your air cover, right? It's like an umbrella over the market you're trying to get to. Sales is the hand-to-hand combat out there actually getting the job done. And if there's ever any doubt as to these two organizations needing to work together, just take a look at the balance sheet of any company. Marketing is overhead. Marketing is an expense. Sales is revenue. And so at the end of the day, if marketing can't prove through analytics that they are helping to drive sales, what do we all think happens to marketing budgets and the size of marketing teams? They go down. And so there has to be a solid relationship between the two teams. And in some organizations, they're closer, and in some organizations, they are further apart. But anybody that's lived through a market cycle can tell you, marketing can't prove they're driving sales. That's never a good thing. So wherever you end up working, make sure you understand how the money is being made. And if you're in marketing, make sure that the air cover you're providing for your sales organization is working where the boots are on the ground.
Thank you. The next few questions I have are going to be for everybody because they're kind of wrapped around leadership, growth, culture, and for the students. So I'm going to start with you, Carolyn. What steps did you take to reach where you are today? And I'm going to ask everybody to answer that question. Lindsay, you're going to be next, followed by Peter, Rachel, Ryan, and follow up with Wendy. So what steps did you take to reach where you are today?
I mean, a lot of steps, a lot of zigzaggy, tons of steps. I'm still stepping. I think a theme through my very zigzaggy career path and even educational path is I wasn't necessarily chasing like to work for a company that had like the biggest brand name or, the coolest job title or something like that. I always looked to work for people who were a lot smarter than me and work for people that cared about their workforce, like work for good people. So I always was seeking good people rather than like cool brand names or cool job titles. So, that's a really short way. I could go down a lot of other different roads to answer that question. But I think for me, that's a common theme as I just followed the path that was paved with really great people. And I'm lucky that I've encountered so many great people throughout my career.
Still stepping. I love that line. Lindsay.
Can you hear and see me?
Yep, we can.
Perfect. So I would say my biggest piece of advice and what's helped me get to where I am today is advocating for myself and being vocal about what I hoped to achieve and why it would help my development. So, for example, when I made the transition from sales to marketing, technically there were roles on 3 different brand teams. And I knew that being on the M&M's brand team would most benefit my development. And so I spoke up and I explained why I believed that brand would help me reach my development goals. And everything being grounded in development and the reason why in my personal and professional growth is really what helped me get to where I wanted to be, because I was able to speak up and be poignant about why I wanted it.
Great. Peter?
Yeah, it's like Lindsay teed me up perfectly there. Like what I always like to share with my mentees and wherever I go speak is, for me, what's helped the most is unapologetically chasing what you want for yourself. So Lindsay kind of talked about this, always advocating for yourself. I'm a firm believer in your ambition manifests success. And what I mean by unapologetically chasing that is, early in your career, you're going to want more than what your cohorts may want for themselves. They may be content in where they are after school. They may be content chasing the big company names like Carolyn mentioned, or the fancy brand names, or working in fancy skyscrapers. But as long as you are confident in what you know you want for your future and focusing on the experience that will grant you, I don't really think you can go wrong. And that's speaking from someone who's been in 5 different cities in 4 years post-grad to get where I am today. And I've been super thankful to kind of let my ambition guide that, and just don't feel bad about it.
Okay. Rachel?
So I remember when I first was even like deciding what college to go to, I had this like crippling fear that it was going to pigeonhole me. And then when I was deciding what major, I was also afraid that that was going to cripplingly pigeonhole me. And then when I was thinking about my first job, I also was just terrified that whatever I chose was going to close doors ahead of me that were not going to enable me to move into other parts of the world. And I'm like, what if I decided that I actually want to go into B2B, but I've been spending time in B2C? And I started my career as a brand manager at Unilever. I moved into e-commerce, where I launched the e-commerce business for Marmot, the outdoor gear brand. Then I pivoted to B2B and worked at Yelp on the restaurants division. And now I work at a tech gaming company, and I do product marketing. And so my biggest advice is that, like, you have a unique set of skills and you bring something strategic and powerful and beautiful to the table, that you can pull pieces from your past experience and use that to help to frame your future role. But also, to Caroline's point, like, finding people that'll take a chance on you and finding good people that are willing to like advocate for you and see your potential and like hire for potential, not hire just for your past experience. And also, I think thinking about like the pie of your life in terms of like compensation and like having great work-life balance and like having a great team and managing people and your role being perfect, and just remembering that your pie cannot always be maxed out at 100 in all areas, and thinking to yourself about like, what sacrifices are you willing to make temporary changes? And to that point, everything's temporary. So
Thank you. Ryan?
Trying to find the unmute button. Yeah, I'd say step 1, go to Penn State. Step 2, make the most of your first job, whatever it is. If possible, try to do a rotational program. I love rotational programs because I changed my major like 4 times at Penn State. I got in the real world, shocker. I still didn't know what I wanted to do. So I did a rotational program at GE. I loved it. You find what you like, what you don't like. They're becoming more popular, but I highly encourage, if you have opportunity, to take it. Step 3, I would say get a mentor. It feels weird at times, but early in your career, I think like asking for help is one of the most valuable things you could do. Some of the greatest like innovators over time, like Steve Jobs, everyone knows Steve Jobs, but he had a mentor, Larry Lang, that was his next door neighbor, that was like instrumental to how he like learned how to think early on when he was building Apple. Step 4, like find opportunities to exceed expectations. Like take the extra 30 minutes to polish your deck. Be the person that sends follow-up notes and AIs. Be the person that like gives a shout out to all the people that like really worked hard behind the scenes that aren't getting the recognition because you're presenting the deck. I think that's really important. And then I'd say the last one, just be someone that you like, be someone that's easy to work with. Like be nice, be thoughtful. That can go a really long way. Like people spend more time with your coworkers than they do their families. So being surrounded by good people is one of the most important things you'll find. And if you could have the greatest job in the world, but if you don't like the people, chances are you're going to be chasing the next thing. So try to find a role that empowers you, you feel supported, and the people are supporting you. Yeah, I'd say that's my very hand wavy 5-step process.
Before I ask Wendy to answer that, I'm going to answer that myself too, because you're exactly right. Be nice. You have no idea how far that will go in terms of your associates, your clients, your prospects, your vendors, your suppliers, your competitors. Tom Peters once wrote a book, In Search of Excellence. Stay close to your friends, stay closer to your enemies. So be nice. That's it for my answer. Wendy.
Well, I always love when this question comes across, right? And especially when you're putting it to someone like me who's closer to the end of my career than I am to the beginning at this point. And the reality is there's no silver bullet, right? I mean, the bottom line is you're all in college. Hopefully you're excited about something that you're studying. Hopefully it genuinely piques your curiosity. And that's where you should go, because what gets you excited is probably where you're going to be successful. And just following that path is going to lead you to some pretty interesting places. And, you know, you might find yourself along the way in a role that doesn't quite fit anymore, or maybe didn't fit at all from day one. But once you're there, you're there. Make the best of it, learn what you can, take what you can from it, and, you know, plot your exit strategy. Because it is a world where, you know, we're basically all leapfrogging now from job to job to job, from company to company to company, because most companies don't have, you know, this word you've all probably heard, pensions, right? Like it was never like that. You stayed in a place. Now you're going to take your skill set and you're going to move it along with you wherever you go. And the one thing, I am so fortunate. I have such an amazing team, and I am mentoring them all the time. I have other mentees from Penn State. I have mentees from the Financial Communication Society, I have mentees at work. And the one thing that I will always drive home, and if you're in marketing, it still matters. When you tell the story of what you do, if you can't tell the story in numbers, then you're just busy. And I tell my team that all the time, because we're all busy all day, every day. But if you can't boil down what you've done to some numbers that tell an impact, then, I mean, think about you're a student. You got numbers that talk about your impact. You got a GPA, right? You've got credits. And the same thing holds true when you're in the professional world. I don't care if you're an intern over the summer. I don't care what you did, but you've got to figure out a way to boil it down to 3 numerical bullet points of the impact that you had. I just helped a Penn State senior take his whole resume and flip it around into impact. So that would be one thing I would just leave with everybody that's a little bit of a practical. And, you know, just be excited, follow the path, but always be able to tell your story in numbers.
We have time for one last question in the last 6 minutes, and I'm going to ask everybody to answer this. And it was a question that was sent in by a student, not only this year, but in the prior years. And that is, you know, it's a hard world out there right now. You look at the different job openings, you look at the number of applicants that are applying, it's crazy. So let's start with you, Carolyn. What should the students be doing now to set them apart in terms of the interview process for their career opportunities?
You know, I think I'm going to quote that Dolly Parton quote again. Find out who you are and do it on on purpose, you know? I'm big on kind of niching down. I knew, at least for me, and I know not everybody knows exactly what they want to do, but yeah, Wendy, was this just you who said like do what makes you excited, or was that you, Ryan? I forget who said it.
Was me.
Yeah, but like find out what's the thing that makes you excited and like become an expert, go all in on that thing, because if you can speak about something with passion, people are going to remember that. They're going to remember that passion that you exude. So, you know, uh, I don't know, find out who you are, do it on purpose, figure out that thing that you're passionate about and go all in on that, because people are going to remember you for that thing that really fuels you.
Thank you. Lindsay?
I love that. I would say a build on that is thinking about your competitive advantage. So I did a lot of recruiting at Penn State for our undergrad internship program. And I heard a lot of wonderful examples about fun. And I heard a lot of wonderful examples about the group project and Management 301. And when you come into interviews or talking about what you bring to the table, think about your competitive advantage against a lot of other students that are involved in similar things. You're all bringing something very new and different and very valuable to the table. So it's okay to speak up about what you specifically brought to the table that made an impact, similar to what Wendy said, in numbers, right? How did you specifically make an impact? And be proud of it and be selfish about it and share how you added value. And that's going to go a long way and set you apart as your competitive advantage.
Thank you. Peter?
Don't be afraid to pick up the phone, because we get 500 applicants for this one job that I'm going to be hiring under me. And the two people that will either call me, shoot me a DM on LinkedIn or something and ask to speak before we even have a first phone screening or phone interview, instead of just submitting something through a portal and then it may never be seen, which is the unfortunate nature of, just to your point, to meet the extreme competitiveness in today's environment. Don't be afraid to pick up the phone and be human. We're all human. So, and we all love to chat. So we could talk all day, I'm sure, everyone on this panel. So don't be afraid to reach out.
Great advice. Rachel?
I think to Caroline's point about like exuding passion, I always went into a job interview pretending, even if I didn't believe it to be true, I embodied the fact that this is the only possible job that I could possibly do. And this is the best fit for me. And I'm literally the only person for this job. Like I went in with this like immense amount of like internal confidence radiating, and just this surety that the role was so aligned to who I am. And I've had a lot of success with that. I also think that a lot of the differentiation happens before the interview process. So similar to what Peter said, like, yes, pick up the phone, but also just like have informational interviews with people on LinkedIn. I feel like the best way that I've been able to get a job is I see a job listing, then I look at other people that would either be peers or would be working with this role, and I reach out to them on LinkedIn. I'll download LinkedIn Premium for a month to 3 months. I'll DM those people and I'll have informational interviews to learn about the company. If we end up having a good conversation, chances are oftentimes they will offer to refer you because you had such a positive experience with them. And lastly, like in the interview process, using the STAR method, which we know situation, task, action, result, like speaking in consolidation, a lot of people have a tendency to kind of ramble and not be so focused in getting the point across that is going to be answering the question. Always just make sure you're answering the question, right? But like do it in a concise way, and make sure that you're getting to the point quickly.
Thank you. Ryan?
Yeah, those are all great answers. I think, passion for me would be a big one. I think the other one that hasn't been discussed much yet is preparation. I just think preparation just goes such a long way. Just like a quick personal anecdote, like Google New York was hiring, like I didn't think I was qualified at all, but I knew that when I interviewed at a company like Google, that I wasn't going to be the smartest candidate. I didn't go to an Ivy League school, but I knew that when I walked in there, I was going to be the most prepared. So when it was like, if you have the bullets from a job description, I could go deep on every single one. I knew their product strategy. And I knew that like, if they weren't going to pick me for me, like that's fine. I got plenty of rejections throughout my career. but I made sure that one of the things that I would stand by was just being the most prepared person, for that job interview. And I took every interview that I got as like, this is a learning opportunity for the next one if it doesn't work out.
Awesome. And Wendy, will wrap with you.
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody hit on it, right? Be excited, have a passion, be prepared, follow the STAR method, tell your story in numbers, try to differentiate. These are all the good tried and true ways to go out there and be successful in the job market. The reality is it's always going to be competitive. I mean, is there ever a time where it's not competitive? So, even once you get that dream job, guess what? You're going to be thinking ahead about what job you want next. So, you got to make it part of your game, right? It's something that you ought to be able to do any day, every day. And you should always be able to just have your elevator pitch ready to go. What do you do in 3 sentences? And anybody that asks you, you've got that ready to roll off your tongue.
Thank you. You've all been terrific. It's been really a pleasure listening to the interactivity between all 6 of you. It was really good. And more importantly, we're right at 7 o'clock, so we're working our timeline. And I'm going to turn it back to Professor Copeland.
Perfect timing. What an impressive and inspiring panel. I can't wait to talk to my students. I was also just thinking I'm so proud to be in marketing. I'd like to introduce Dr. Malloy, our chair of the marketing department, who would like to say a few words before we continue with the breakouts.
I just wanted to thank everybody for an absolutely stellar panel. I learned a lot about what's going on in different industries, and I'm sure the students did as well. I also wanted to thank Timmy for being the moderator of the panel. You knocked it out of the park again, as usual. Dr. Copeland for, being the advisor for this great group of students, Dr. Whiteman for being here to introduce the panel, and also the students who are pouring blood, sweat, and tears into this organization. And you guys did a great job as usual. So I don't want to stand in the way of getting into the breakout sessions. So I'm looking forward to popping around and hearing more about your insights. So thank you again.
Lisa?
Yes, thank you so much, panelists. This was a great session, and I'm so happy that you guys were able to join us tonight. To kind of wrap things up real quickly, I'm just going to share my screen real quick. So kind of getting into it, we do have an exit survey that we'd really appreciate if the students could fill out real quick by scanning this QR code. I'm going to leave this up for a few seconds, but if you can't scan it right now, I will be sending it in a follow-up email, just thanking you guys for joining us. So yeah. And then again, I know we have some people from the Smule Ethical Leadership Challenge, and I know you guys need this QR code in order to get your points. So please take this time to scan it so you can get your attendance in. All right. So again, if you didn't have time to scan this QR code, please just email me and we can work something out. But without further ado, I'm going to start getting the breakout room started. So the first one I will be opening right now will be Ryan. So I'm going to start yours right now.
And Lisa, is the link to that already in the Q&A? Is that where people find it?
Yes, I just added it to the Q&A earlier, and it should still be there. And then if you don't have it still, it should be also in the email I sent with the Zoom link. But Ryan, you can go into your room and I'll make you host.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Ryan.
Thank you so much. And while Lisa's doing that, I just want to say a quick shout out, Will, Emily, Lily, Alice, Anna, Stella, you guys did an awesome job. And of course, Timmy leading this effort every year. So appreciate it and really appreciate it, panelists, so much. I look forward to debriefing with you later.
Oh, yeah. So I'm going to catch up with everybody in a little bit. I wish everybody good luck in the breakout rooms, and I can't wait to hear how that goes at 7:45.
Fantastic.
Okay. Good. Good to see you too, Meg.
Meg, thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Pleasure.
Should we go into our individual links or wait until we get the green light?
No, all the Zoom links are officially open right now, so you guys are free to go.
Awesome.
So,
Thank you.
yep.
Talk to
Thank you
soon.
guys.
So Lisa, a couple people were asking if you could post the QR code again and also the link again. It's possible if people come in
Yeah,
later.
I can do that. I can do that right now if anyone's still in the room. If not, I'll send something out at the end with the PowerPoint.
And do you want to stop recording?
I think I'll do it at the end because I have all the Zooms going on right now, so it's a little hard to manage.
I was able to just answer the person with the link with the Google Doc. And then, yeah, are you able to share screen? You might be able to do that and then put the QR code back up. Although I think that the student who asked is not in the room. So perhaps they'll contact you separately about that.